All right, Chapter 8 starts on page 217, about the same length as the previous chapter. Just so you know, again, that if you do go out here, wherever it was, I also have the same kind of thing for Chapter 8. All right, so there's different examples. There's different examples. There's different examples. That's how you learn this. That's why I put those out there. And again, I didn't take the time to go and create them myself. Normally, I just went out to api.jquery.com, pilfered their example, and put it out there. All right, but that's how you learn, I think at least. So notice in here we've got chaining jQuery operations together for efficiency, ways to filter DOM elements in a jQuery object, methods to use jQuery objects to traverse the DOM, and how to iterate through each element in a jQuery object set. One of the things I like about the book and what the author did in this chapter is if you take a look at the example that he's got here, and I'm gonna do this twice. You'll see why in just a second. This first one's going to run off the page. All right. So what he shows here is he's using 5 lines, and the first thing he's doing is he's saying, okay, grab every div, grab the ID of content that is basically inside of a div, all right? Then grab the first paragraph that's in there and make it bold. Then, in that first paragraph, find any span that you have in there and make it red, okay? But he's doing it over 5 lines, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it over 5 lines. But when you use a jQuery concept called chaining, you can do it like this. Because what it does, and you probably have heard of other things in the IT field that do this, is it says, okay, run this. Whoops. It says, run this right here. And it says, take the output of that and use that as the input into this. Then take the output of this and use it as the input into this. And then finally the output of that, use it as the input into this. All right? You can do it with a lot of lines as is shown up there, but this technically is one line. Since it's one line, typically it's easier to look at and figure out what's going on, but it should actually execute much faster in the browser, putting in a single line of code as opposed to putting in 5 different lines. And that's the first thing the author starts talking about here. So he explains what's going on in here, and that's what I tried to explain to you, and then shows it as 5 lines, and then says, well, why don't we chain it? And just write it as one line. All right? And you can keep going. These chains can be as long as you want or need them to be. All right? Okay, then they start to talk about how to filter these things. And again, what I like about this book, you may or may not agree with this, but is normally on most of these things, they give you syntax, then an example, then syntax, then an example. And it keeps going over and over and over with different examples that are in here. This is the table that's on pages 218 and 219. All right, again, notice 0-based. So when you say, show me index equal to 1, it's the second element. All right, so in other words, this is div equal to, so this will find the second div that's on a page. All right. And what you typically find is if I'm going to use this a lot, if I'm constantly going to be using, for instance, that 1 right there, sometimes this stuff gets to be a pain in the butt to go and type all that in. So a lot of times what you'll do is you'll assign it to a JavaScript variable and then do whatever you want to do to the variable. But since the variable would actually equal this, anything you change or tag onto the variable will be just as though you typed in all of this. Again, you can grab the first one, the 0th one. you can grab the last one. You can check, as it says there, with things like has. Okay? To me, what has happened, the way I look at this, is really CSS, in a lot of ways, I've never really considered it to be programming. I personally have not. Again, it's a styling language. It's an aesthetic tool. And I don't mean to say that people who are really proficient, a lot more than I am, in CSS, don't know what they're doing. They do. All right? But the point is, what you're able to do with jQuery is you're able to treat CSS more or less like it's a programming language, all right? Or you're bringing the components of CSS in, and you're using them. I don't know if you'd say as variables or what. Slice, maybe you remember that from last semester in the JavaScript class. As it says, remove elements before the start and after the end. So if you want to just trim out part of it. Okay. And again, I'm not going to click this, but as you can see, the author says, if you want more, and he gives you a hyperlink in here every time. All right. How to traverse the DOM using jQuery objects. There's multiple ways of doing this. Some of them are shown in this next table, table 8.2 on pages 220, 221, 222, and 223. So notice the table itself is over 3 or 4 pages, but this still does not show every single thing that's available. All right? But there are several different examples in here. Again, one of the things you're going to be eventually required to do is to use many of these things. But I'm not going to sit there and say, you've got to use these 4 things from this table, these 2 things from this table. I don't really care that much how you use them. I do care that you use them and that they're done basically through jQuery code. All right. You'll notice that next, previous, all right, next until, previous until. You can work with parents, etc. All right. And one thing to realize, all right, for instance, if I do it up here, if I do this, so I'm going to keep this real small, real short and sweet. So if I do something like this, I'm not even going to put the other HTML tag. We'll just say that there's a head. We're not going to put anything in there either. So let's say that I've got a paragraph here with some text in it. All right. Then I come in and I say UL for an unordered list. And I'm just going to I'll put 3 of them in here. All right. If I'm working with this right here, and I ask for its parent, what's it going to be? What's the parent of that LI? The UL. If I'm right here and I ask for the previous, it's going to give me this one. So it provides a quick way for you to be able to traverse your way up and down things. Now, if I said to you, what's the parent of the UL? It's the body. It's also the parent of the P tag. And what's the parent of the body? The HTML tag. And what's the parent of that? There isn't any. It's the root, so to speak. But it is a way that you can traverse your way through this very quickly and typically with a lot less code than if you did the same thing using straight JavaScript. Yes?
Why is the paragraph tag the parent of the UL?
No, if I said that I'm wrong, no, I said both the paragraph and the UL are children of the body.
Okay.
All right? If I said that, then I misspoke. Now, if we had done something like this, where I don't know why we do that, but if for whatever reason we put it in there, then it would be. All right? All right. And again, a lot of these, like and self, I don't think I've ever used that one. But two of the ones that are in this particular example are unbelievably important. And they are each, right there, and map. Because each and map allow you to iterate through an entire sequence of elements. All right, it's the equivalent when you use each or when you use map, it's like using a for loop. All right, so it's a very quick way where you can iterate your way through and do almost anything you want to do. All right, so when you look, it says each iterates through the current set of elements and executes the specified function on each one. So this, as it says right here, all right, sets the width. So for each span element that's in here, run this function. This function says grab the current element, which is this, and apply some CSS to it. In particular, set the width of each span, the width to 300 pixels. All right. Map, as it says, it iterates through, and we're going to see right at the end of the chapter some of the differences between using each and using map. So I'll hold off on that until we get to that. I guess it's here. All right. So as it says, each is one of the most important jQuery object methods because it allows you to traverse your way through something. This is a weird example that he put here, but he put it there anyway. It says it iterates through all paragraph elements on a page and sets the content of each element, all right, to the index number. So if I had 7 paragraphs, it would change them to this is paragraph 0, this is paragraph 1, etc. I am literally changing the text because when you say .html, that means put that code in there. Okay. The map, as it says, also iterates through the same way. Although similar to each, there's one big difference. Each will return the same jQuery object, but map will return a new jQuery object with the values returned for each iteration. So it's more or less, is it returning it as a clump or is it returning it as individual pieces? That's kind of the difference between the two of them. So there's a little bit more work that you have to do when you're using the map, but it can give you a little more power depending, again, on what it is you're trying to do. All right. So when you look at this, you might say, fine, Jeff, I still don't have a frigging clue as to what you're talking about. All right. So if we go in here and we take a look at the example, because I think actually this is a pretty decent example. All right. When you use each, take a look right now. What's going to happen with each one of these is when I click the each button, it's going to make this text red, and it'll be 10 pixels wide. Orange, 15 pixels, yellow, 20 pixels, green, etc. So again, you'll notice when we do this, it's a one-time shot, but it did it collectively as a group. All right, it returned one answer. When I click map, which I'll do in a minute, it's going to literally make a div. The first div will be red and 15, the second div, etc. And notice that when I'm using map, I can keep doing it if I want to. I don't know why I'd want to, but I could keep doing it. All right? So he explains that in here maybe better than I just did. But he says, in this example, you learn the process of using a jQuery selector to find all paragraph elements. You then use the map function to read through and create a new span. You also use the each to iterate through each paragraph and restyle them. And each paragraph has to be set up the same way in here. In other words, there's a delimiter in here, so everything that you read up till the blank space is the first parameter, then there's a blank space, and whatever comes after the blank space is the second parameter. So you could go and add whatever you wanted to in here, if you wanted to add more colors, sizes, or whatever you wanted to do. All right. The next example that they show with this traversing the DOM, it's not so much that it's a bad example, all right, but in my opinion at least, it's not well written. Let me just show you why. This is traverse the DOM, and you've seen stuff like this. So what was the quality of the food? It was a 3. It's pretty obvious what just happened there. All right. And this was a 5. this was a 0. And notice it all works. But it allows you to put in any number you want. So I can put that in, which to me is, if you're going to only have 5, you should only allow for one number, and you should make a check in there. And you should only allow for values between 1 and 5. That wasn't done here. It could be done without really much code, all right, but he didn't do it. Maybe he did it for that reason. I don't know. So notice it's 5 here. If I put a negative in front of it and hit enter, that goes away. But it doesn't immediately, it's not immediately reflected. So as soon as I did that, it doesn't know that I put the negative in here. All right, so it's not checking it out. It's not until I hit the enter key that it's figuring that out. So as the author says with this one, it says you use jQuery objects to dynamically access DOM elements relative to their position from one another. All right, again, I'm not saying it's a good example or a bad one. It's just the example that they used. All right. All right. So I think that's, we went through both chapters today, and that's fine. When we pick it up next time, we're going to go over chapter 9. I don't want to do that because that's a long chapter, and it's really detailed. So I'd rather let you go now, okay? But Wednesday, if you get a chance, please look through chapter 9, because the real power of this stuff is event handling. All right? That's all I'm done for the day.